Committee meeting. I call to order the Water Policy and Legislation Committee and special meeting of the Board of Directors for West Basin Municipal Water District, February 23rd. It is now 1:04. Do we have a quorum, Mr. Assistant General Manager?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll read through the roll call. Director Scott Houston.
Here.
Director Don Deere. Director Don Deere, did I hear you?
Can you hear me?
Chairwoman Gloria Gray.
Great, he's here. I think I heard Director Deere. Are you here?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
All right, Director Deere is here, and Director Gray and Director Houston.
Perfect. Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. Item 3 is public comment. Do we have anyone from the public who wish to comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have not received any request for a public comment. However, I do notice that we do have members of the public that have joined us today virtually. If anybody would like to speak during public comment, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand. Madam Chair, I do not see anybody raising their hand.
Thank you very much. Item 4, presentations.
Madam
there
Chair,
any
we do not have
presentations?
any presentations.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, action calendar 5A. Assistant General Manager, please present that item.
Happy to do so, Madam Chairwoman. The first item, as you mentioned, under the action calendar is item 5A. This does begin on packet page 3. And this item is to authorize a memorandum of understanding on behalf of the Greater Los Angeles Integrated Regional Water Management Region with local project sponsors regarding grant application fees for Proposition 1. And for this presentation, we have our water policy analyst, Tammy Hurley. Hi.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, directors. As EJ had mentioned, this item is being brought to you today to provide an update on grant application activities related to the Greater Los Angeles Regional Integrated Regional Water Management Program. We refer to it as PIRMIT. And this is also for your consideration to authorize the general manager to execute a memorandum of understanding with the local project sponsors. And through this process, there are a few local project sponsors that require to have an MOU in place in order to pay their share of the consultant fees. So in response to the release of the IRWIP grant solicitations, an application has been submitted to DWR seeking funding for local projects throughout the region. And the Greater Los Angeles IRWIP selected a consultant through a competitive bidding process to assist the region in preparing and submitting that grant application. So as the contract administrator on behalf of the Greater Los Angeles region, West Basin is coordinating this effort. Last October, the board had authorized the general manager to enter into an agreement with Woodard and Curran for the grant application preparation service. So as I mentioned earlier, each local project sponsor is required to pay the fees associated with preparation of the grant application. And each local project sponsor has formally committed to processing their payments. So this commitment requires one of two options. The local project sponsor can either prepare a memorandum of understanding or they can submit a letter of intent. And some local project sponsors require an MOU for their agency's administration in order to pay the grant application fee. So because some of those local project sponsors will need an MOU, this item is being brought to the board to consider authorizing the general manager to sign the MOUs in order to pay the consultant for their time and materials. There is no fiscal impact with this item. West Basin will collect the application fees from each agency, each local project sponsor, in order to pay the consultant. So a draft MOU is included in this report under attachment A. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll go ahead and read the recommendation. So the recommendation is that the board authorizes the general manager to sign the memorandum of understanding for local project sponsors to process their share of grant application fees. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Tammy. Thank you. Are there any questions, Director Deere, any comments or questions or?
No,
Remove
I
the
have none.
item
Thank you.
Right, Director
I have
Houston,
none,
do you have
thank you.
any questions? Director Houston, was that you too?
No questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I think it's just a matter of the process, so I concur with Director Deere. We will move the item forward for recommendation to the board.
Yes.
All right, thank you. Item 6, information calendar. 6A, election leaders forum. I believe that Director Houston wanted to have this item on the agenda, so shall I ask, Director Houston, did you want to make comments or did you want staff to present it?
Let's have staff present and then happy to make any comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right. Assistant General Manager, please present the item.
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, this item is 6A, as you mentioned. It does begin on packet page 10. This came to West Basin staff at the direction of President Houston. He asked us to look into holding or hosting a local elected officials or leaders forum. And so we're bringing this forward to this committee and of course to the board to receive some feedback as far as the planning and implementation of such an event. It's worth noting that West Basin Municipal Water District has held similar events in the past. Most recently, it was back in 2015, West Basin hosted a water issues and drought forum in the city of Culver City. The event was held at the Courtyard Marriott, so it was an off-site or a third-party site, and was a full-day program, including breakfast at 8 a.m. and concluded at approximately 3:30 p.m. So a full day of activities and information presented. The forum included a West Basin and guest speakers, a moderator, and a luncheon. The total budget for that event was roughly $15,250, though the most significant expense was the offsite location, food, and parking. As I mentioned, at the direction of President Houston, West Basin staff is bringing this item forward for additional feedback from the committee and board. As originally discussed, this event would be held at the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility in El Segundo. It will include a focus on regional water issues, including imported water, wastewater, recycled water, groundwater, and conservation. This location obviously would present significant cost savings in compared to our 2015 event. And of course, staff would begin the planning and implementation depending on the feedback that we receive here today, as far as locating and identifying potential speakers, and of course, securing the date and event. So within this memo, you can see on packet page 10, we did highlight or identify 5 potential issues that we wanted to address today. First and foremost is the date of the event. It's been asked that we host this event on a Friday, not part of the Memorial Day weekend that does not conflict with the board's calendar. Secondly, the location. As I mentioned, this was originally discussed as an event that would be held at the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility in El Segundo, and specifically within the Water Education Center. Third, as I mentioned, the content. Staff has been asked to put together a program that includes a tour of the Edward C. Little Water Recycling Facility and a discussion on regional water issues with possible representation from Metropolitan Water District, Los Angeles Sanitation, West Basin Municipal Water District, and the Water Replenishment District. The audience, as originally requested, the target audience would include local elected officials, county and state district office staff, with invitations to be sent to West Basin's Assembly and Senate delegation. And last but not least, the budget. This event was not included in our fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. As you might remember, in the adoption of that budget, West Basin was still in the midst of significant COVID protocols. Since that time, we've opened up our office, returned to in-office meetings, as well as in-office and in-person staff meetings. So we believe that we could host this event without any significant issues. The potential expenses would include a continental breakfast and coffee, as well as lunch, and perhaps a promotional item for attendees. So we would not have significant expenses related to an event like this. It'd be very similar to what we might consider a VIP tour or hosted event at the Edward C. Lowe facility. So with that, West Basin staff is here in the office and of course joining us virtually, and we are hoping to receive a little bit of feedback that we can put together this event and do it well. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions or provide any thoughts. Thanks.
Director Houston, did you want to comment before I ask questions of the member, Director Deere?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. I think EJ laid it out very well, and I recall back in 2015, that was an excellent event. It was when I was not too long on this board, and I believe you were serving as president, Madam Chair, at that time. But, you know, I think that because it's been quite a number of years since we did that, we are in the midst of another historic drought, and then, of course, you know, the ups and downs of our climate. And we have a lot of newly elected local officials in most of the cities we serve at this time. So I think the timing is right that we should host another forum like this. I definitely want to work with our staff on making it the most effective, efficient, and economical that we can do. So I think hosting at the plant, figuring out what the program it will be, but probably not all day. My vision in part, Madam Chair, would be perhaps people who, there's two options for tours. So for example, if they're there in the morning and they hear some of the briefings and then take a tour, but let's say they couldn't make it in the morning, but maybe after lunchtime, we have a second tour. So I would envision people might be able to stop in for a portion of the programming. And the biggest thing here is to see the facility and to hear what we do, and also try and showcase some of the other partnerships we're working on with our neighboring agencies. So I think this is a good time to get it going, and we're looking at dates more toward April, May, or even a little after if we need to. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Director Houston. Director Deere, did you have questions before I ask mine? What would you like to do?
No, I don't.
Right.
Go right ahead.
I think it's always a good idea to educate our leaders, whether they're local, state, or federal, on water issues, and certainly our priorities at West Basin. My question, I just want to make sure, is that, and I heard EJ talk about the target audience, is it local elected officials versus state and federal? Because I know we have our state and federal lobbyist trips, so it's target, the target audience is local elected officials. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to allow President Houston to elaborate, but in our initial discussions, it was focused on local government. However, it was discussed that we would invite our state assembly and Senate leaders in case they were able to attend.
Okay, but the focus is on local elected officials. So, and how many new people do we have? Because they certainly need to be educated in terms of our local new elected officials.
So I think you'd have to define newly elected, because some are re-elected. I think we've done a simple calculation. I think there's something in the realm of 20 newly elected. However, as Director Houston, or President Houston, excuse me, mentioned, we have a number of elected officials that weren't in office back in 2015. And obviously due to the COVID protocols, there's been a number of people that have been elected back in 2001, of course 2002, that have not had a chance to obviously work with West Basin. So forging those new relationships, there's quite a bit. Within the West Basin service here, we have roughly 87 city council members / mayors. There are a couple of cities that have dedicated mayors. So we would begin with that target audience of 87.
Right.
And then, of course, we can add to that as directed by the board.
Right. Well, we have 17 cities in our service area, so there is quite a few local elected officials. And the last time we did an educational forum was back in 2015. So I just want to make sure the target audience is the local, because I know we already lobbied. We have the lobbying trips to state and federal, and certainly they should be aware of it. Maybe some of them can come, but you know, local elected officials, I think we can kind of look at days that are not geared towards Thursday or Friday for those state and federal. But anyway, those are my questions, and certainly there's enough folks to draw from in the industry to talk about all those issues, those subject matters that you mentioned, EJ. And like I said, it's always good to educate folks in our community. All right, well, those are my questions. I think the full board needs to weigh in. So Director Alvarez and Director Williams are not available today, so why don't we just move that forward for discussion by the full board and get the input from them also. Is that okay, Director Deere and Director Houston?
Yeah, good idea, yes.
Director
Yes,
Houston?
that's great, Madam Chair. And one quick note on that. Yes, my thought on this as always was the local elected officials, particularly city council members, maybe even some school board members, because we work a lot with schools, of course. And then my thinking was preferably doing it on a Friday, because for most of us who also work and do other things, that usually is the day we have the least competition for our time. So I'm hoping we get better attendance if we hold it on a Friday at the plant, and certainly not on the weekend. And then also what I was just thinking to do is more a matter of courtesy, is just we could extend the invitation to the offices of our state and our state electeds, just so in case, in particular, a key staffer could come. And again, the whole option would be as a drop-in. So maybe they cannot come for a whole, program, but they could come for a portion. So certainly we can all talk about the board level. Another option in the future, of course, is individual tours for the assembly members and state senators. But I feel like if we're going to put this forward, we could at least send an invite to the local offices and also our county supervisors' local offices, because they all have new staff as well. So all this being said, I think it looks like we could have just a nice program. And lastly, remember, we just know not everybody physically will be able to come. So it'll be a draw, how many people can show up, but let's try and have this opportunity to do it as much as possible in one shot. So thank you very much for your support.
Yeah, and
may I comment just briefly? There's also the city clerks and the city treasurers. If you're looking for local elected officials, those people are often not in office for more years anyway, and they deserve to be informed if possible.
Good idea, Director Deere. I'm glad you mentioned that. And Director Houston, I'm glad you mentioned county supervisors, because that was the other group I thought we really needed to make sure that they're aware of it. There's one other point I wanted to make. One option also is hybrid. We could certainly encourage people to come in person, but there may be someone that may not be able to come, so we can look at that option too. But we'll have a full discussion with the board. But again, I think it's always good to educate the community, whether it's our community leaders or just residents, folks in the community, about water issues. So I look forward to having that discussion at the full board level. All right. So thank you for that. If nothing else on that item, let's go to.
Sounds good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Here, 6B, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The next item that we have for you is our legislative update for January of 2023. And you can find that on packet page 12. However, I will be jumping straight into our state legislative update, which begins on packet page 14. So though this is the January update, due to the delay with this meeting, we did want to provide as much of an update as we could in relation to the legislation that was introduced. So February 17th was the last day for bills to be introduced. The next major legislative deadline doesn't occur until late April. However, the legislature will have its spring recess, which begins on March 30th. This year, more than 2,600 bills were introduced prior to the deadline, which makes it one of the more bill-heavy years in the last decade. A high percentage of these bills are considered to be spot bills or intent bills. And by that, we mean through the legislative process, each legislator will have an opportunity to amend and shape their legislation or the policies they intend to implement. So this will be a great deal of work, obviously, for West Basin staff, but of course, our state legislative advocates, Niamela Pappas and Associates, and we've already begun that process. Last week, Governor Newsom signed an executive order intended to build water resilience in the face of climate-driven weather extremes. Obviously, the atmospheric rivers and all of the precipitation that we've seen throughout the state is very positive thing for the water industry and water supply, but it does wreak havoc on our communities and has caused millions and millions of dollars worth of damage. And obviously, as we've read in the papers, cost some people their lives. And so we want to make sure that obviously on the statewide level, anything that we can do to protect and preserve, we want to. You can see that within the governor's order, he does seek to protect water reserves, replace and replenish rainfall and snowpack supplies, expand the state's ability to capture stormwater runoff in wet years via groundwater recharge, continued water conservation measures, and require state agencies to review and make recommendations on the state's drought response actions by the end of April. Last month, the governor also introduced an initial budget proposal that would fund the state's programs and priorities for 2023 and 2024. Among the proposal's multiple priorities, the budget pledges to invest in measures that protect Californians against climate change and extreme weather, including drought and flooding. $125 million is dedicated for drought-related actions incorporated in the 2023-2024 action plan, with an additional $500 million in 2025 and 2026 to ensure key water storage projects are completed. Another thing to note, and one of the items that we'll be tracking throughout this legislative year, is related to the current budget and the projected revenues. The state enjoyed a nearly $100 billion surplus last year, and this year the governor expects a deficit of approximately $23 billion. This typically does impact the bills that move through the legislature, as obviously the legislature will be looking to cut the budget. But making this matter worse or compounding the matter is that the state's legislative analyst's office, the LAO, is expecting this figure to increase by the governor's May revise. So we'll continue to track it through the May revise, and then of course into June when the governor is required to move a budget bill through the California State Legislature. A reduction in the amount of tax income revenues is one of the significant culprits in this issue. And again, we'll see a little bit of that after taxes are due in April. In other news, it was announced by Assemblymember Reggie Jones Sawyer that he would be running for the LA City Council District 10 in 2024. Obviously, this is something that West Basin is tracking. The Assemblymember has been a great friend of West Basin Municipal Water District and is included as one of West Basin's 2022 Legislators of the Year, primarily for his legislation last year that recognized Juneteenth as a state holiday. So when we visit with him in Sacramento in March, as President Houston just mentioned a short time ago, we'll make note to wish him luck in that race. I'll now turn to some of the legislation of interest that has been introduced in this session. It's worth noting that the items that we have in your board packet were submitted last week. As I just mentioned or touched on, the deadline for legislation to be introduced was February 17th. So there have been additional bills that have been introduced since this board packet was put together. But West Basin staff and NPA staff are quickly reviewing those bills and identifying some of our target issues. I think one of which we wanted to address today is the concept of a non-functional turf. You've probably heard a little bit about it from West Basin staff, but also our key policymakers in Sacramento. That includes the governor and the State Water Resources Control Board. As part of our drought declarations and requirements within our CII sectors, right now they should not be watering non-functional turf with potable water. And there are a couple of concepts and bills that are put together this year to address that. The first of which is AB 1572 by Assemblymember Laura Friedman. This is related to the use of potable water on non-functional turf. There's another companion bill, Assembly Bill 1573, related to water conservation and landscape plants in relation to a non-functional turf. So we'll continue to track that, but as of now, there are several working groups working on this issue. This is something that staff hopes to bring back to the board to consider a potential position on non-functional turf within our CII, our commercial, industrial, and institutional sectors. And we, of course, continue to work on some of these concepts. Protecting the use of recycled water on non-functional turf is key, as we have several different city buildings and landscapes that utilize recycled water. And though we do wish and would work with them to remove that turf when and where they're utilizing recycled water, we want to make sure that we recognize that effort. Lastly, I also wanted to note that there is another bill that has been requested West Basin continue to track, and that bill is Assembly Bill 1216 by Assemblymember Al Marasucci. And this is related to wastewater treatment facilities and monitoring of emissions. And this bill was or is sponsored by the city of El Segundo and is related to the issues at the Hyperion wastewater treatment facility. And so we'll continue to work with the Assembly member on this effort. We have reached out to NPA to alert them to it. And so they've already notified the Assembly member staff, just that we would like to be kept in the loop as this bill moves forward. Lastly, I wanted to note that in addition to the bills that you've seen in your packet, and again, staff will be updating this list as we pour through the bills. We did want to note that there are several proposed bills with water bond language and funding amounts included. And this happens every few years. Members of the legislature introduce potential water bonds. Usually you'll see a handful of those bills, and then they get whittled down to one or two that we can kind of work with. And I wanted to note this because Aqua has put together a working group to discuss priorities for any bond that moves forward. And West Basin has been asked to join and be a part of this group. So I've been attending some of those meetings along with our staff, Matt Bay. And so we'll continue to bring those updates to the committee and board as things progress. Lastly, I wanted to note that as we begin the process of planning for our trip to Sacramento, it's really important that our state advocates really understand what we're doing here at the local level in relation to the drought, but also in relation to water supply. So I wanted to highlight that because staff met with Neomel Pappas and Associates, and specifically Emily Pappas and Jamie Miner, to discuss West Basin's overall strategy for advancing a regional approach to water recycling, groundwater replenishment, and local supply reliability in the coming years. We received some great feedback from NPA, especially as it relates to Metropolitan Water District's Pure Water Program, and of course the Operation Next and Hyperion 2035 efforts. And so the integration of those facilities is something that they saw as a great opportunity to work with our legislators, and hopefully in the years that come, we can potentially get new funding mechanisms to help us integrate those programs and deliver recycled water in the West Basin service area. So with that, I would like to move on to the federal affairs update, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, EJ. Are there any questions?
No.
All right. All right, Director Houston, any questions?
No questions right now. Thank you.
All right, can you move on, please?
Happy to do so. So I'm now on packet page 21. And much like our meeting earlier today with our state lobbyists, West Basin staff also held planning meetings with the staff from our federal lobbying firm, Vance Koyak Associates, to discuss again this overall strategy. Gaining federal support for our planning efforts for the efforts of our partners and setting up the need for future funding requests will continue to play a key role in achieving the success in these efforts. And I mention this because West Basin staff has actually been working with the Water Replenishment District. We've got our lobbyists working with their lobbyists, talking a little bit about the benefits of groundwater recharge and additional regional groundwater pumping. So you can't have one without the other. If we're going to see increased groundwater pumping in the West Coast Basin, we're going to see additional recharge. So these programs are very much related. And of course, as Metropolitan Water District continues their advocacy efforts, which are fairly significant, I think, in both Sacramento and Washington, D.C., we want our legislators and our congressional delegation to understand that when they hear pure water, they recognize the benefits to West Basin Municipal Water District, as well as the region. So we're going to continue to work on this effort. West Basin staff is also continuing our effort to work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. As you know, we still have approximately $30 million in a authorization for potential future funding. We have met with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers staff, and we've talked a little bit about these concepts, but we're hoping to meet with our Army Corps counterparts in Washington, D.C., and we'll be talking about this a little bit more, seeing exactly how we plan to integrate water from Metropolitan Water District's Pure Water program and down the road, potentially from Hyperion, to integrate our systems. And we think that current authorization would be a great opportunity to get the U.S. Army Corps involved. So staff continues to work with VSA on our upcoming advocacy trip to Washington, D.C. in April. The week of April 17th has been identified as the preferred week for our visit. And now staff will work with VSA to schedule visits with our delegation and our Legislator of the Year award winners. Also some big, although not shocking news that Senator Dianne Feinstein will not be seeking re-election in 2024 has created somewhat of a shock, I think, throughout the California political structures. You're seeing a number of different members of our congressional delegation express their interest in running for that spot. And of course, that includes Representative Katie Porter from Orange County, Representative Adam Schiff from West LA, Representative Barbara Lee from Oakland, and Representative Khanna from Santa Clara. With this being the beginning of the new 118th session of Congress, updated committee roster and positions have been announced with the following notable positions for members of the West Basin delegation. Senator Feinstein shall serve as the chair of Senate Appropriations Subcommittee on Energy and Water, and this includes the Bureau of Reclamation and Army Corps programs. Obviously, she'll continue to be a key part of our advocacy effort throughout her serving her final term. Next would be Senator Padilla, the chair of the Senate Environmental and Public Works Subcommittee on Fisheries, Water, and Wildlife, which includes the Environmental Protection Agency in relation to water, and of course the Army Corps programs. And last but not least, we wanted to note that Representative Kamala Gerdove, our new Congress member, will serve on the House Natural Resources Committee. Obviously, Representative Grace Napolitano, who's always advocated for local supply reliability projects of importance, will serve as ranking member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment. Typically, you'll hear us refer to that as our T&I subcommittee. And again, she has been a tremendous leader on the issue of water recycling, but also, of course, a tremendous advocate of West Basin Municipal Water District. Now for a few updates on the Colorado River. Senators from 7 western states that use Colorado River water have announced the creation of a new Colorado River Congressional Caucus that will meet to discuss ongoing issues related to ongoing critical shortages on the Colorado River reservoirs. One of the caucus's priorities will be to discuss potential legislation that would require states to implement actions that encourage more efficient water use. In addition, at the end of January, all 7 states released proposals for reducing the use of Colorado River supplies. 6 of the 7 states, which include Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, issued a coordinated proposal while California released its own counterproposal, with California stating that multi-state proposal disproportionately affects California water users. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation will now go into a review period with plans to release a draft water use reduction plan by the end of March. This will be crucial for West Basin Municipal Water District as we'll want to address their findings when we're in Washington, D.C. In April. You can see that there are additional federal updates that can be found in this month's VSA report, which begins on packet page 21 and concludes on packet page 26. And last but not least, I did want to highlight that in our upcoming board meeting on Monday, I believe that's the 27th, we do have a pending item, an action item for a resolution in relation to the adoption of a related policy on Buy American directives in our procurement process. And we've asked Pete Evich from Van Scoyoc Associates to join us for that presentation. Obviously, having boots on the ground in Washington, D.C. and tracking the current Buy America provisions within the most recent legislation, we wanted them to be available just in case the board had any questions. So I wanted to highlight that as they'll be joining us at the board meeting. So with that, Madam Chair, I did want to just touch on one final issue. I did want to give credit where credit is due. Matthew Bay, our water policy analyst and our current legislative guru here at West Basin Municipal Water District, did prepare our notes for today's meeting. Unfortunately, he's not able to be here because he will be serving his jury duty. So I did want to say thank you for him for all of the work and preparing all of the materials that you have before you today. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Matthews and Tammy and everyone, all the staff. So with that, are there any questions from Director Deere or Director Houston?
No questions.
This is Director Houston, and I guess really quickly, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, EJ, and everyone who works on all of this. Those mentions you said, and I saw that too, that Congress member Comliger Dove has a key committee. So for her being a freshman, that's extremely important for West Basin. So again, all the more reason when we visit Washington, D.C. and we speak with her and her staff that we see what we can do to work with her, but also garner her support on our projects. So that's a very noteworthy appointment in Congress right now. And the one other thing I want to mention is you said that Senator Feinstein, obviously she is retiring, it's official now, and you got a number of folks who are rumored to run or have run. And just as a note, the three that have declared that I'm aware of are Congressman Adam Schiff, Congress member Katie Porter from Orange County, and Congress member Barbara Lee, I believe, jumped in earlier this week officially. I have not heard of anybody else officially. Well, excuse me. There's also West Hollywood Mayor. Oh, I'm jumping the gun. I'm jumping the gun here. Sorry. So those are the three running for Senate that I'm aware of so far. But then that's going to start opening up other seats. So just as a point of note, Adam Schiff, since he's running for one thing, he can't run for the other. So now his seat is open, and Assemblymember Laura Friedman is running for Congress up in the Glendale, Burbank, West Hollywood area, as is Senator Portantino, as is Nick Melvoin from LAUSD's board, and the mayor of West Hollywood, Seppi Shine, just threw her hat in the ring. So assuming other people may at some point get seats means more openings down the road. So we have a lot of musical chairs coming before us potentially that will affect the delegation. So I guess all the more reason why we work to solidify the relationships that are long term, as well as the new ones we do have with redistricting. And now we're going to potentially have some other new people. So I just wanted to note that for my colleagues on this call. So thank you, staff, for the work you do to keep us informed.
Great points. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Director Houston. We'll move on to item 16, MWD report.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. We are on our last information item. It is item 6C, our Metropolitan Water District Program update. And I do recognize that President Houston, you'll need to drop off in approximately 17 minutes. but I think that's ample time to get through this presentation. So for this presentation, we have Tammy Hurley-High. So go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, Jay. Good afternoon again. So this memo report includes a summary of Metropolitan Water District activities that are relevant to West Basin as customer agencies, and will conclude with a brief summary of water supply condition. And the report begins on page 27 on the committee packet. So the first item is a Pure Water Southern California program. So last January, the Metropolitan Board had authorized an agreement with two firms for program management services in an effort to support this program. And last year, Metropolitan was successful in receiving funding from the State Water Resources Control Board in order to start up the program. That state funding will cover the program management and demonstration plant support. However, the funding does not authorize initiation of construction or other certain specific related day-to-day operation activity. So in an effort to ensure the continued support for the overall operations and maintenance, the board had authorized funding to increase an existing agreement with CDM Smith Incorporated. The vendor will continue current testing of the secondary membrane bioreactor process. That process has involved pre-testing period, which has been extended in order to ensure a stable biological process and proper functioning of that equipment. So second, regarding Metropolitan pre-stressed concrete cylinder pipe rehabilitation program, there will be upgrades to Metropolitan pipeline located within West Basin service area. And the second lower feeder delivers treated water from the Deemer Water Treatment Plant in the city of Yorba Linda to the Palos Verdes Reservoir in the city of Rolling Hills Estates. So Metropolitan PCCP program is a long-term plan to replace or reline feeders. And the cost associated with this program has been incorporated into Metropolitan Capital Investment Plan. So last month, the board had authorized a contract with JF Shea Construction to rehabilitate Reach 3B of the second lower feeder and authorized an access and permitting agreement with the city of Lomita. And this action awards a construction contract to install approximately 19,500 feet of welded steel liner pipe and replaces 3 sectioning valves that are located in the cities of Lomita, Los Angeles, and Torrance. The construction schedule for the second lower feeder Reach 3B is scheduled to begin early 2023 and will last for 3 years. So during this timeframe, Metropolitan will work with member agencies to coordinate specific details of the project, which will include a total of 3 planned shutdowns. Next item regarding the Colorado River activities. So a summary of that report begins on page 28 of the committee packet. As you may recall, the Bureau of Reclamation published a notice of intent to prepare a supplemental environmental impact statement for the 2007 interim guidelines pertaining to the shortages and the operating guidelines. So the need for this supplemental EIS is a recognition that the risk facing the Colorado River Basin are unacceptably high and cannot wait until after 2026, when the operational strategies are thoroughly identified, analyzed, and ultimately adopted. So in an effort to addressing operation for year 2023 and 2024, Reclamation is committed to using the best available information to develop near-term operating guidelines while longer-term approaches are developed. So Metropolitan has submitted letters to formally request a few items that include protection of the water that is already stored in Lake Mead under their intentionally created surplus program, and to have supplies that can provide for public health and safety deliveries. And if reductions are set forth by Reclamation, if those actually happen, Metropolitan has requested for Reclamation to consider applying those reductions equitably across all users of the Colorado River Water Basin states. So also their letter had indicated that the preferred alternative should include upper division state action that help assure sufficient water gets to Lake Powell in order to protect the infrastructure, the safety, and the water deliveries and the hydropower generation. So through this process, it is anticipated that reclamation will consider 3 primary alternatives. First would be no action. Second would be the reservoir operations modification alternative, which would be a set of actions adopted under applicable federal law. And then the third option would be a framework agreement alternative, which would be a consensus-based set of actions that builds on the existing framework for the Colorado River operation, including commitments included in the 2019 drought contingency plan. So Metropolitan has indicated that they support the third option, which is the framework agreement development. So the framework alternative would build upon the approach of the 2007 interim guidelines and the drought contingency plan, which was recently developed with the basin states and the tribes. So the draft supplemental environmental impact statement will be available for public review this spring in 2023. And then the final EIS is anticipated to be available with a record of decision late summer 2023. So we will keep you informed as activities happen on that item. So moving on, included in this memo is a report on board meeting actions that took place in the month of January. Also attached is a summary of the board member vote results for January. And then attachment C includes a list of items for the February meetings. Regarding the board agenda look ahead, a few anticipated key items for discussion in the future meetings. February board retreat. So as you know, last week Metropolitan Board gathered to discuss priorities and the visioning of the Metropolitan Water District. And these discussions included resource planning work for 2023. This will be intended to integrate water resources, climate and financial planning into a climate adaptation master plan for water. So in the coming months, a series of discussions will occur at the subcommittee and on the long-term regional planning and business modeling. The Metropolitan Board members will consider the ideas that came from the retreat and consider actions in the near future. So looking ahead to March, they are planning to have a report on the portfolio of recommended actions for the State Water Project dependent areas. The Metropolitan Board will consider authorization of Colorado River Protection Volume Agreements that may take place later in the coming months. In April, there will be a report on alternatives being considered by reclamation and that supplemental EIS for the Colorado River Basin operations. And then they will review and consider implementation of a water supply allocation plan. So those are some updates for activities and programs at the Metropolitan Water District. And then there is a water supply update that is included in the packet as well. I will try to be brief. The charts really show a lot of positive things moving forward in terms of water supply and snowpack. But more important is that there is a significant increase of supply. DWR had just announced they updated the supply allocation for the State Water Project contracting agencies. In January, they made an announcement to receive 30% of the requested supplies. And just yesterday, DWR had announced a 5% increase on top of that. And so this is as a result of the early gains in the Sierra snowpack and then the storage in Lake Oroville. So right now they expect to deliver a total of 35% of the allocation to all the state water contractors requested supplies. And for the Colorado River Basin, I kind of gave you an update on that already. But in summary, the series of atmospheric river events, they have helped to alleviate this drought. The snowpack remains well above normal for this time of year. And the temperatures that are cooler than average, they've also helped to preserve the snowpack and minimize evaporations. So I'll conclude with that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Tammy. Are there any questions?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Dillon?
Nothing, thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there is nothing else, I think that's the last of item 6. So 7, any closed session item? Assistant General
Madam
Manager,
We have no closed session items.
excuse me. Item 8, Director's comments, Director Deere.
Yeah, a good meeting, good short, brief meeting. So I'm gonna hang up now.
All right, thank you very much, Director Deere. Director Houston?
Bye-bye.
No additional comments, just a very informative meeting, and thank you, staff.
Right, my comments just the same. Thank you to staff. Thank you, Assistant General Manager, and your staff this morning, all of the staff for the report. And so with that, are there any future agenda items? Anyone? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee and board. Thank you very much for your time.